Financial Officer for Morristown and Southeast Morris County MUA. Ann also worked in the private sector as a controller, as well as a family-owned construction management company and architectural firm. Here's some interesting stuff there now. While working full-time, Ann attended night school to earn a BS in accounting from Montclair University and an MBA in finance and international finance from Seton Hall University. Ann has been teaching jazzercise for 11 years and has two daughters, ages 18 and 21. All right, and if we're ready, Ann?
Yeah, I'm ready.
Thank you.
All right, I don't have to get close, right? You told me? All right, first, I hope everybody had a cocktail. Yes? All right. My attempt today is to keep you awake during Excel. And now I think I'll take a selfie and post it on Facebook. All right. Anyway, yeah, good morning. Thank you for coming to the class. Today, I'm going to talk about Microsoft Excel, but I'm also going to talk about etiquette in Excel. I'm going to talk a little bit about functions, but also planning and how to really be effective using your spreadsheets, because I know we all know how to do a sum, but I am going to go through some new things, the 2013 and 2016 version, which has some really cool features. I actually learned a lot myself, but I want to tell a little story. According to some analysis carried out a while ago, 88% of spreadsheets have errors in them. I bet you all have experienced that. So I'm going to tell you, don't be sad about maybe your spreadsheet, but here's some real interesting ones. And throughout my presentation, I'm going to talk about them. So here's some of the worst ones. That time, George Osborne based government cuts on a report using a spreadsheet. So a student found a paper used by George Osborne to justify the cuts that were actually entirely wrong. The report originally concluded that the countries with a public debt of 90% see their economies shrink by 0.1%. Well, in fact, the spreadsheet was missing a few rows and should really show these countries had grown by 2.2%. So those rows and columns, there's some seriously missing things, you're in trouble. So you really need to determine the role of your spreadsheet, right? What's it for? Are you doing P&Ls? Are you doing budget? You need to think about that. And in etiquette with this, you should really adopt a standard that your department, if you're using it with a department, if you're sharing it with people, it should be a standard. I have that problem in my group. Some people format differently, they save it differently, so I'm going to go through that a little bit as well. And you want to design for longevity here. You don't want to have to redo these over and over. You know how much time you put into it. And you want to be somewhat consistent with your formulas. So, I got my little clicker here. You want to keep it simple. You really do. You don't need to use all the sheets and all the rows and all the columns, right? I mean, it's ridiculous. And you need to always test your spreadsheet as you're going along, right? You go along, you get to a significant place, make sure it's doing the right thing. I'm going to go through. This is the menu of the new, I'm sure some of you have seen it. I hope you upgrade to the new version. We have the quick access toolbar. Look, I have a laser thing. Quick access toolbar here. What that does, I'm going to take this away. That's kind of cool. You can actually add to that, and it follows the spreadsheet everywhere. You can see it. There's what they call a ribbon. I didn't even know that until I did this. And it just has all the menus, an expanded menu. And then you have your formula bar right there. And in there is where when you're doing your work and typing, that's where it all comes out, on the formula bar. And then you have your grid, okay? And then the status bar, which shows everything that's going on, all right? And I have another quick story. How about the time that MI5 accidentally bugged the wrong phones? Yeah, you know MI5. It's the intelligence agency. It turns out they aren't immune to this either, to mistakes. In 2010, the agency was responsible for bugging 62% of the wrong applications for communication data because of a spreadsheet error. And thanks to the error, it caused service to apply for data on numbers only ending with 000, so they were bugging all the wrong numbers. So that's pretty interesting, right? This is an example of the ribbon. And this is the formula ribbon, okay, up here. Does everybody work with 2013 and 16, or you're not even sure? Get it, okay? It has right there, that insert function. You click on that, and you can actually say, hey, look, I have to add a bunch of numbers, and it will help you do that. So that's kind of cool. Oh. I'm going to briefly go through formulas very quickly. They're made up of functions, references, constants, and operators, okay? Now, you know this is the function, all right? And then you have your cell right there. And then you have, this is a constant. I try not to put constants in my formulas, all right? Because that means it could change. So you don't want to do that. And then you have your operators here, the mathematical operators. This is an example of a quick formula. You know sum, right? That's a cool formula. You need to use that. Okay, there are a couple of different types of functions. This happens to be the mathematical formula. And in here, we want to find x, so they found x there. You have sum, you have count. These are just a few of the functions you can use. I'm going to go over a few of these. Mainly sum, of course, is the one we use a lot. It groups and adds a bunch of numbers. But count does count cells. Count A counts all non-empty cells. It's, you know, you may want to use something like that. But one of the ones I use is sum if. And what is that? It sums a group of a list that matches a certain condition. So, for example, if that line or row, if anything equals 10, it's going to add it. So that's an example of that. I have a lot of slides, so I'm flying through them. All right, here's one of my pet peeves. I don't know about you, but the cost of toners on a color copier, right? It makes me crazy because I get these bills. They get a free color printer, but it costs a fortune for the toner. So I want to know how many color printers I have that are HP LaserJet. Oops, sorry. See my clicker already. All right, so what happens is I do a sum. I want to add up everything that has an HP LaserJet in it and just add those, so sum if. And that comes to 11, but I want to know how many the police have. So you can add another condition. It says sum if in this column is HP Laser, and then you have police. So that comes to 3, but I know it's a lot more, but that's another story. This is another interesting way, real quick, that you can do conditions where you ask, okay, sum this if you have a 0 in a certain, in that one row or a column. And you can identify different criteria with that. It's just a little trick you can do. Average. Everybody uses averages. And you know how you format your row or your cell to have only 2 places? Well, guess what? It has a lot more, right? And you're off that penny and everything? Yeah, that's always interesting. So what's important with average is round. You need to round. So what does round do? It rounds to the next number. And then you don't have that penny error. I don't know, I've had that. You need to use that formula. You can round down, you can round up, you can round anywhere you want to certain decimal places. And that's what that function does. So let me show you an example of rounding. These are our tax levy here, and I round my numbers. And it was really important for me this year to have the same, or that tax rate of 0.595 for the municipal rate. So if something had happened and they rounded wrong, I would have been in big trouble with the point. If it went to 0.596, I would have been in trouble, okay? So thank God. Oops. Jeez, I can't do this. I apologize. There it is. I got a point here. Thank God they struck the rate right. But if you're not rounding, it could go out to a whole bunch of places, okay? So when they struck the rate, I guess the county wasn't really rounding. You can see here, I don't know how they got those numbers, but that's the point. The good news is I look okay. That's it. All right, Roman Arabic. Why do I have this in here? Because I thought it was kind of cool. I just thought I'd add it. Do you ever have a problem getting, I don't know what an Arabic number is. I don't know how to get it to the Roman. Well, there is a function to do that. So in case you ever wanted to know what the football was, what the Super Bowl number was, you can do that. Anyway, isn't that cool? I like that. All right. Who knows people who add the spreadsheet anyway? I do. Just saying. These are logical formulas like if, and, or. You embed them in your formula, okay? I'm going to go through these quickly, and then I have a bunch of examples. So, if. It sounds just like what it is. If a certain condition is met, it returns the value, or if it's true or false, okay? So if this is true, then do this or do that. So I use that quite a bit. You should use that. It's pretty neat. So for example, if 25 is less than 15, put loser in. Otherwise, you could put winner. So you can actually embed like different phrases for conditions and things like that, which I think is kind of cool. If error. I'm going to go through error messages today because I think people don't know how to handle that. I get these spreadsheets that have, maybe they divided by 0, and all of a sudden I'm looking at this thing, it has answer, and then the error. So there's ways to handle that. And one of them is saying if error. So if an error is returned, you can actually say, look, if you get an error like dividing by 0, you can actually tell it, put 0 in there for me. Because you don't want to have to go through trying to figure out how to fix that. That's kind of a cool little trick. And they want to take a selfie with this fourth quarter earnings. I think that's pretty cool. There's text formulas, okay? Like proper, trim. Proper, it takes, you know, I have this, I wish my accounting software had spell check improper in it, don't you? It makes me crazy. Anyway, if they have capitals and regular letters mixed together, you could put proper, and then it'll fix all the way it's supposed to be look. It's kind of cool. And then there's trim. So I have people who put extra spaces in. All you need to do is put that particular cell, and you say trim it, and it will trim it, move it, get rid of all the extra spaces. These are just some interesting facts on the text formulas. There's a dollar, so it converts a number to the dollar, the currency format. So say, I don't know about you, but I have my bottom line, I have it double-lined and everything. I get to the end of my spreadsheet, and it doesn't have the dollar in it. Oh, all right, let me format it. Well, instead, with the sum, you can add that little formula in there, and then what it'll do is it'll always put a dollar sign in that particular formula, in that total. So I think that's pretty cool. Then you have text, which actually converts something that's text into a number. There's ways of changing things, just to give you a few. So I'm going to talk a little bit about shortcuts. I know that's what I'm supposed to talk, but it's more than that. I'm going to talk about functions and names and things you can do. It's hard to see this without having a computer in front of you, so I hope you get an idea in general of what I'm talking about. But first, a story. That time JP Morgan used manual copy and paste model and lost a lot of money. I could see this happening. JP Morgan hired a quantitative whiz kit to create a new risk value model, which would then determine the hedging strategy. Unfortunately, the model was relying on copying and pasting over several spreadsheets. And it did so by dividing rates by their sum versus the average. So as indeed, meaning adding volatility, and it was out of factor or two. So therefore, it lowered the perceived risk. Okay, so they went and invested. Well, they took huge risks, which they would have never taken, and they lost $2 billion that year by making a copy mistake. So you got to be really careful. Keyboard tricks there, shortcuts. Who uses F2? Anybody? That's like my favorite. Yeah, F2 is like my favorite. I'm going to talk about that. Control Home. Anyone? You press Control Home, you're on A1. Have to do that. You can double click. I'm going to go through this in a little more detail. You can right-click to get a menu, all kinds of little tricks on the keyboard. So this is one of my spreadsheets, F2, all right? All it does is it's hard for me to turn around. It takes the number, okay, your F2, and it sees your formula, you see where it's coming from, but that really only works on the page that you can see. I mean, if you're doing F2 and it's on another spreadsheet or another sheet within that workbook, you can't see it. So you really need to be careful when you're using F2. It's right just for that information. But it does point in color right here and right here of exactly what the spreadsheet is doing. Another cool thing is you can double click on your sheet. You don't have to rename things. You could just double click on it and rename it. It's just one of the little things you can do. The other neat thing about the sheet, say for example, I'm doing, I don't know, this year, 2017. Well, I really liked my 2016 format, so I'm gonna actually make the sheet 2 2017. So you can right-click on that sheet and actually move or copy that sheet. What the cool thing is instead of highlighting everything in your spreadsheet, you do that. You know how you highlight it, you move it to another spreadsheet, all right, I have to do the printing again. Well, this moves everything. It moves the print, it moves the margins, it moves everything, it copies it. So that's a really cool trick that I recommend highly to do. This is another way of renaming. You can actually go right to the home ribbon, and it's the menu there, and you can right-click. You can see that it gives you a whole bunch of other options to do. Oops, this thing is, such as renaming and moving and things like that. Another option to change things and to get a menu is to literally right-click on that cell. Anybody right-click, you copy, right? A lot of people I see in my group, in my department, they don't do that. They go up and they start looking to cut and paste and do, but you can actually right-click, and that's a cool thing to do as well. Another neat trick on the keyboard. You press the alternate button and all these neat things come up, all these little boxes, right? I'm like, what the hell are they? Well, guess what? That's giving you shortcuts. It's called a key tip. And with the alternate button, all of those little numbers and letters are telling you what you can do with Alt 1, Alt 2, Alt F, whatever you need to do. So when you see those things pop up, that's what that is. It's not a mistake in your spreadsheet. I'm going to go through some error messages. Yeah. So how about a fidelity mistake? They had a minus mistake, all right? There was a big flap recently over, it was a while ago though, let me say that, over the Magellan Fund, estimating in November they would have made $4.32 per share in a distribution, but guess what? They didn't do it. People wanted to know why. Well, what happened was the tax accountant is required to transcribe the numbers onto another spreadsheet. In doing so, he forgot the minus sign. So it was plus $1.3 billion gain, but guess what? It was a minus $1.3 billion loss. So needless to say, he made a mistake by $2.6 billion. It's not rounding. These are some of the error types I think you see. Anybody see error types? Or you're all perfect, right? You don't see divide by zero and all that kind of stuff, right? Well, I'm going to go through these because I think it's important that you learn how to handle these in a different way, that you don't have to go crazy. How about that one? Anybody see that? That number where it's not wide enough? All you have to do is double click on that, on the column in the corner, right? And it makes it wide enough. You don't have to experiment to try to figure out how to get it wide. And then watch that when you're printing as well, because that will print like that. I've gotten spreadsheets from some of the people that work for me, and I see these, that. I said, are you kidding? Well, anyway, that's one way to fix that. Oops, I went backwards again? Oh, God. They gave me a clicker, I don't know. Divide by zero. We all know divide by 0. It displays that when you're trying to divide by 0. There is a little trick you could do. I talked about that if error. Well, there's also the if, okay? And you say if the answer is divide by 0, simply put 0. So it's not a big deal, and that saves you from trying to get rid of that divide 0 problem, okay? This is NA. This is is displayed when the value isn't available. So it's looking up bananas here, right there, okay? But there is no banana in that lookup field. So it can't find it, so it's NA. But you can actually put a formula in that says if you get that error, just put a 0 in. So there's all little tricks, you know? Name. That's the name error. You can see what's wrong with that, right? You spelled it wrong. That's that error. So you just have to be careful how you put in, and use those formula. When you click on that formula bar on the top I talked about before, use that. And you can even ask it, how do I get the sum? And it will give you the sum. It will give you that formula. Pretty cool. Null. Null says it can't find it. It's not intersecting, it doesn't relate to each other. You could see why, because it's missing a comma. These are simple fixes that you should pay attention to when you're doing your spreadsheets. So make sure you use that colon when you do your ranges. Okay, reference. We've seen this. Anybody delete a row and here you go, right? Okay. The only real way to get rid of that is to do your row not with commas, but actually in an expanded way, you know, like the whole range. But what I've done in my spreadsheet sometimes is I don't insert things or delete things that are at the end. Or you kind of do it in the middle so that the whole range is there, and try to, if you do delete things, it is what it is, but you gotta be careful when you delete. You can also do undo, one of my favorite buttons. Anybody like undo? Anybody, you know, the old Lotus days when you couldn't undo anything. You know, I was like, save. Yeah. Value. This is when you have a mixed group of numbers and letters and it doesn't recognize it, so it comes up with that value error. A way to fix that is to do the sum. Do the sum of the whole thing and it won't come out with that error. But you gotta be careful when you do that. So another quick story. I hope you don't mind. Barclays acquired Lehman Brothers and accidentally bought stuff they didn't mean to buy. After Lehman Brothers crashed, Barclays decided to buy some assets and sent over a spreadsheet detailing exactly what they wanted to buy. But instead of deleting rows, he just hid them. So when he converted the spreadsheet to PDF, guess what? All the rows showed. So guess they ended up buying all of the assets from them. Oops, big oops. This is absolute and relative. I know. I don't know why it's called that, but it is. Absolute is just a cell address that contains a $sign in it, okay? So it doesn't move. When you copy or paste or anything, that $sign says don't change that value. Don't change that row, don't change that column, and that's very useful. Where you have relative that moves with it. I think you all know that when you do copying and cutting or whatever you're doing. As you can see, you can use it in many different ways. I use it all the time when copying formulas or just in general. I don't want it to move. It's important to use. Another important part of math, basic math, is your operators. Which goes first, right? Parentheses. If you want that to happen first, you got to put it in parentheses, okay? And then you have the exponents, and you have multiplication and division, as you know, and then addition. So if you're having an error, you really need to look at your parentheses. That's usually where it happens. I got a lot of slides. How about anybody get circular reference? Yeah, all the time, right? Okay, that's when you add something And that one, the same cell that you're adding into is part of your formula. It refers to itself. And you get this error. You made a mistake, that's what it's telling you. But I found a cool thing on how to find that. So in a big spreadsheet, it could be difficult to find, right? In the new software, there's a thing called, up in the corner there, it's the format ribbon, and it's called error checking. And you really should look at this, because when you click on that, it will give you where the circular error is, right there. It tells you. How cool is that? Only we get fired up about this stuff, like Bill Homa, right? Other errors that you get is not, you always start with an equal sign. I think we come from the old days where you didn't need that, but you do. Make sure that you're open, that you close your parentheses. Another thing is the colon that we talked about before. You have to use a colon in a range of data. Also, you cannot mix different kinds of functions and formulas. So you can't put a numeric and a text type function in the same formula, okay? So you have to be careful with that. You're going to get an error. And another one of my favorites is when people actually put the comma into your formula. So they put 1,000 for 1,000. And first of all, you shouldn't put numbers in formulas anyway, but I'm just saying. That's another one. And cutting and copying, you got to be careful when you cut. I don't cut. I copy and then get rid of the other, because you're cutting, it's moving. It's moving the formula, it's just can be very ugly. So you want to really be careful with that. So I'm going to show you some other errors and some other mistakes. This is funny. Excel thinks it knows what you want to do. So it sticks that little caret there, right here. It says, I don't think I like what you're doing. It says here. So you can actually, it returns like a little message, and I'll show you on the next one. You get that little box on the bottom, right here. It says, I don't think this is the right answer. I think your formula's off. So you click on that, and it tells you it's inconsistent. It tells you, do you want to do what I think it should be? Or do you want to ignore the error? So like me, I hate seeing that little box. I hate seeing that caret. So I delete, I say clear it. Just clear it. Get it out of here. Well, later on, you may want it back. And if you do want to find, you can't find your error, you can actually put those little caret things in the corner back, like this. You go to the menu and you say, hey, give me back those carets because I should have looked at it, and I didn't. Another mistake people make, they're doing an average. What happens if it's nothing there? They don't calculate the average. You got to put that 0 in there. You need to be very careful with that, especially when you're doing averages and things like that, functions. There's also a way you can do error checking. In the ribbon formulas and under auditing, that formula auditing, you can do error check. And it gives you some suggestions as to what they think maybe your error is. They think they're smarter than you, and probably could be sometimes. How about Fannie Mae mistake? Fannie Mae discovered a $1.3 billion honest mistake. I'm making us feel good when we have those little errors, When billions are at stake, or even in ours, it's best to have someone look at your spreadsheet, okay? Fannie Mae, which finances home mortgages, stated in a news release of third quarter financials that it discovered a $1.136 billion error in total shareholder equity. The senior vice president explained in a written statement, there were honest mistakes made in the spreadsheet used by the implementation of the new accounting standard. I don't know about you, it's not an honest mistake to me. So, how about ways to audit your spreadsheet? There are ways in the new Excel to audit your spreadsheet. This is one where you can go to the main file and go in, and you'll see that you can go check for errors. Oh, that's cool. You press on that, it goes and thinks it knows what your errors are. Another neat thing besides F2 is another way. You can sort your data by extremes. So you want to go from the highest to the lowest and see if it all makes some sense when you're doing tables and things. And there was another interesting idea I saw where sheet 1 is not necessarily the data. It's actually an information sheet if you're sharing your spreadsheet. So it has your name, it has what I was trying to do, is it protected, things like that. So it's kind of a little trick you can maybe think about doing. Another thing is up in the corner, find and select. This is kind of cool. You can edit, instead of Control F and then all that kind of stuff, you can actually, there's a little new box there called Find and Select. And you can even find formulas, comments, and using that neat function. So I think that's pretty cool. In the function menu, you can actually look at the traces, what they call traces, and it'll point to where you're looking to see what that formula does. So for example, you do that trace this dependence, that just traces everything that's dependent on that cell. And the other way is precedent. It goes the other way. That's a cool way of trying to figure out what you're missing, okay? Then there's the watch window. Anybody ever see that before? That is probably one of the coolest things. It's used, say you have a big spreadsheet, right? And you want to see what the bottom line is, but it's nowhere near where you're working. So there's this thing called watch window. And up in the corner there, under the formula auditing, is watch window. You press it, and it tells you, it says to you, what do you want to watch? So in my spreadsheet, thank you. Already. I want to watch the amount to be raised, but it's on the bottom, you know? So you click on that, you tell it what you want it to do, and then guess what? It sits there. It sits wherever you want it to sit. So I can watch my totals. That's a really neat trick because I'm always going from one to the other, freezing panes, things like that. So that's what that's for.
You can actually watch it on different pages.
Yeah, I think it's on the same sheet. I believe it's on the same sheet. Yeah. You can even, oh, there it is. It's watching the formula, it tells you where it comes from, things like that. And this is called evaluate your formula. You want to see exactly what the formula is doing, and you can actually drill down on this formula. So sometimes understanding how it's calculating, like in other words, what order, with your parentheses and everything, is important. So in this instant, you clicked on it. It's hard to see, I see that. It tells you what cell you're in, and it also tells you what the function is. And then I do this thing called evaluate and step in. So it steps in. It drills down, essentially. It says, oh, it's doing this first, then it's doing that. And that's important when you have a longer formula. How is it calculating? And you may want to use some parentheses, right? So that's kind of neat. So I also want to talk a little bit about finding and looking at your formulas. So in this spreadsheet, this is what it looks like without formulas. I can't see it. This is what it looks like, a little glimpse here. So you could do show formula. I think it's pretty busy myself, but that's what it looks like when you show the formulas. Do you use it? I've never used it, but I just want you to know you can do that if you have a smaller spreadsheet. Okay, how about formatting your spreadsheet, right? This to me, I have pet peeves, but this is one of the most important things you can do because that data may be fine, but if it's not formatted right or it doesn't look right, it doesn't mean anything, okay? It's very important to format it. So there's a couple of different shortcuts. One of them is built-in styles. You can actually go in and use their built-in styles right here. Okay, it gives you colors. It gives you suggestions as to what to use. I always thought it meant something, but it doesn't. It's just the style. That's one of the things. Do you want grid lines? You don't have to have grid lines. And there's a way to get rid of your grid lines in the view column, in the view menu. And I thought that was neat. Oh, did I skip again? No, I'm sorry. No. Okay. One of my pet peeves, I do talk about pet peeves, is centering your title. You could actually merge and center. Anybody use merge and center? You got to use merge and center. All right, that's neat. Because then you're in the middle if you have a heading, okay? Now I'm showing how you do that there. Okay. These are my pet peeves, all right? I've been doing this a long time, starting from the beginning of time with Lotus and things. I like the spreadsheet to be where it should start. Like, don't save your spreadsheet in the middle of the calculation. You may not start at A1, but wherever you want somebody to open it up, please save it there. Centering numbers, it makes me crazy. Centered numbers like this, I'm a purist. I like to see them all going the same way. Using different fonts. I think I'll put maybe Times Roman here and maybe a 12 point over there, you know. Keep it consistent, you know. No labels on your spreadsheet, none. It's just, it is a plain number. It's just there. And then I also had a spreadsheet. When I moved into another town, I'm not going to say, I got to that spreadsheet, and okay, the top ones were not formatted. The middle ones all had dollar symbols. The next one had commas, and then the next one had Times Roman. Really, be consistent a little bit here. And then I have someone who works from, I really shouldn't say, I'll be nice. She's a really nice girl, and she does a great job, but she's not trained. So I said, how did you get that number? She goes, hold on a minute. She goes to her calculator, adds it all up, and then says, and puts in the number. Put the way you got it in there, because you can't remember most of the time. Put the calculation, equals 1 plus 2 plus 3. Don't be adding on a calculator. You don't even need it, okay? Inconsistent number formats, like I said before. Some dollars, some not, some commas. Oh, I have a story. Some people, in a spreadsheet I was working on, I can't find some money. I can't find $2,000. I'm using somebody else's spreadsheet. I'm looking everywhere. Well, I changed the color, and there was a hidden number. It was white. So be careful when you hide things like that, because you can't find it, and it's not it adds, but that $2,000 is missing. And then you can use, there is a way to indent. Do you use that, anyone? That up on the menu, you can just indent, and it lines everything up nice instead of pressing that space button, okay? So those are some of my little pet peeves I just thought I'd share. File names, be consistent with those, okay? And also, when printing, I recommend, on the next sheet, to use the footer. Put the date in there, and then also put where the file is stored. Because trying to find your spreadsheet sometimes is not easy, especially if someone else is doing the work for you. So I get a printout, it has nothing on it, I gotta find it. So what you can do is in your footer, simply click on this little button, put it in the corner, and then when you print it and you go back to your file, there it is. It tells you where it was. So that's a little footer trick there. Ways to screw it up. Plenty of ways to screw it up. There's 1,048,000 rows and 16,000 columns. Guess what? I'm going to use them all. Yeah, no. No, you're not going to do that. And then also blank cells. We saw before where that can cause a real problem. So be careful. They do matter. Blanks matter. I'm going to put as much as I can in one cell. I'm going to make this thing huge. The formula, the text, anything. You don't need to do that. But then again, some people like to use many columns, many rows, and it's huge. So you have to kind of figure it out. Oh yeah, I put everything in the one cell, like the names. I have someone, again, she put the last name, first name in the column. Then she put the first name, last name below it of other people. So it's like a list of employees. First, last first. How do you sort that? You got to think a little bit, you know. You can parse it, that's a whole nother thing, but you really want to be careful. You want to think it out. And also, you don't have to do it by yourself. There are people, you know, have them look at it for you. We're just talking about that. Take a look. Hey, do you see something? Does it make sense to you? Then the other one is, I love to use word art. You don't need word art. You really don't. People are looking at word art. It's a spreadsheet. You don't need it. And then again, you put everything in sheet 1 because it'll be easy to find. No. You can spread it over a couple of sheets. It's a good thing to use. So, another interesting way to screw up your spreadsheet is to put it on manual calculation. And when the spreadsheets were really big and you didn't have a lot of memory in your computer, you would put it on manual, and then you would change things. Okay, but nothing changes until you click on that, because it's manual. Well, you can make a lot of mistakes doing that. You don't need to speed up your spreadsheet that much unless you really know exactly what you're doing. So that's not really important. This is kind of neat. This is my spreadsheet. You could do a quick analysis. It's a tool that's in the newer versions. Again, it lets you total. It says, okay, what do you want to do with this number? Do you want to total it? Do you want to average it? It actually shows the calculation results of each one of those. Down at the bottom here, you can do that. It's a little tiny button on the bottom. You'll see, you can't see it here. It's a tiny little bottom button. You click on that, it'll do the analysis for you. There's a lot of tools in the new spreadsheets. Let me show you about formatting. How am I doing? I'm doing good. How am I doing? How much? That's it. Okay. Here's my plain spreadsheet. Looks pretty bad. So what do I want to do? I want to merge and center right away. I want to see my titles, okay? So you merge and center. So that's what I'm showing you the golf utility right now. Then I want to format my numbers, okay? We do all that. But another way to do it, I think I mentioned, was cell styles. You can actually borrow one of these and say, look, just put the style in for me. I don't have the patience for color. I just don't do it. So there's an example of using cell styles. It's kind of neat. I mean, you can use that if you want. Or you can format it as a table. The problem is it's a table. I'll go through this quickly. And that's what it would look like formatted as a table. But then it's a table. It's different. Another cool trick I'm just going to show you quickly is conditional formatting. This is where you use symbols to show trends analysis. So on the top you can see I've highlighted it and asked to do an analysis of the numbers. It's showing where the trend is in my sales for golf. Notice I had a really good year in 12, but it's not happening right now. The weather wasn't cooperating. So what does it look like? It looks like that. It's a little busy, but hey, it's kind of cool. And there's all kinds of different symbols you can use. Oh, I like this. Another cool thing to do is spark lines. Anybody ever hear of that? I'm going to show you that very quickly, I promise. And there's my spreadsheet. I put flags in because it's a golf course. I thought that was appropriate. So I want to do a spark line. So I pick a cell, and I say, put a little graph in there for me. I kind of want to see it visually. Then I want to add, so that's what it would look like. You can see my trailing off isn't great. Then I'm going to add some data points. That looks pretty good, doesn't it? And then I'm going to see the whole spreadsheet like that. So you can add that. I mean, has anybody ever used that? I think that's one of the most fun things we do, is to make it look good, right? And one other thing, and I'll make this brief, is You could protect your spreadsheet. There's ways of doing that. One is on the main sheet. Others is to say, okay, I want to protect my spreadsheet, put a password in. There's a couple of different ways to do that. And quickly, it doesn't really matter, but it does tell people it's a final document. So you may want to consider protecting your spreadsheet. There's a couple of different ways. So last thing I'll talk about, because I think we're at the end, yeah? One more thing. You don't think about longevity. This is one of my spreadsheets. I put the percentages in what I want to do with what ifs up on the top, okay? And that way, in your formula, I want to see what 2% does. I want to see what 1% does. Consider doing something like this, where you keep it up on the top there, and then it changes the formulas, and you can see the effects of maybe amount to be raised or whatever you like to do. I think that's it. Am I done? All right. Thank you for your time. I hope you enjoy my class. Yay. I believe it's lunch now. Lunch is served now, so enjoy. And now I'm having my cocktail.